What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. Sufjan Stevens is about to release a new album called A Beginner's Mind. And this is with Angelo de Augustine, or Angelo de Augustine, who is on Sufjan Stevens' label Asthmatic. Sufjan Stevens started that label with Lowell Brahms, who he's also done collaborative projects with. Most recently, his ambient album called Aporia from just last year, March of 2020. So this is actually, A Beginner's Mind album is, again, a collab album with Sufjan Stevens and Angelo de Augustine. And I'm about as excited as possible because the two songs that I've heard that are going to be on this album, Reach Out and Olympus, were just phenomenal. So a little bit about Sufjan Stevens. He's basically one of the best indie rock artists of the past, I'd say, 20 years. His album by album quality and kind of game changingness and critical acclaim are about as good as it gets. Like, it's a short list of artists who have his type of a track record. And yes, he is a name who most people, most casual music fans probably haven't heard. But you remember the movie that came out a couple years ago called Call Me By Your Name. He was nominated for an Academy Award for contributing to Call Me By Your Name, and his song, his contribution to that was Mystery of Love. And this wasn't even featured on any of his albums. So when you look at his first couple of albums, he was basically, in a prestigious art school. So A Sun Came and Enjoy Your Rabbit were around the times when he was taken to these musical studies. He's a multi-instrumentalist, even though he didn't learn to play the guitar until college, which is a relatively late start for most musicians. But after those first two albums, now we're talking 2003, he has an album called Michigan, and that's where he's from. He grew up in different parts of Michigan, but Michigan was kind of the first album that really put him on the map, and he even embarked to do a 50 states project, basically dedicating an album for every state of the United States. And that was very short-lived. And he later said that that was kind of a joke, and he really didn't mean to take on that type of a project. And, going forward, he wants to be a little less precious about how he releases music, which he has. A lot of his albums are not a traditional style album, like that ambient album Aporia, or he's done like a Christmas album. He's done a good number of side projects. But if you look at his proper album by album breakdown, after Michigan, he had an album called Seven Swans from 2004. So that's 2003's Michigan, very good album, really put him on the map, kind of a folk style album. And then Seven Swans, another indie folk style album, very good as well. That's still a lot of people's, maybe second or third favorite album of his. It's definitely in a unique style that he hasn't been showcasing as much of in recent projects. But after Seven Swans was his Illinois album, which if you look at the Pitchfork's greatest 100 albums of the past 20 years, greatest indie albums of all time, you will see Illinois on a lot of these lists, very high up on some lists. I mean, this album got a 90 Metacritic score, which is an aggregate of all the different critical publications and so forth, just kind of getting an average of all of these publication scores. 90 out of 100 is very, very high. Illinois was the #1 album of 2005, according to Pitchfork, #1 according to No Ripcord, according to All Songs Considered from NPR. Just a very beautiful and pretty complex album. I mean, there's a lot going on instrumentally. He does a lot of experimentation with different folk, indie, electronic styles on some of these songs. He's got a song called John Wayne Gacy Jr., chilling lyrics, but, don't take it the wrong way. He's not advocating for any mayhem. He's basically a outstanding storyteller, narrative painter, and he just does so in so many different autobiographical ways. He talks about his life, but he talks about life in a way where he's also spotlighting the generalities, just the human concepts, like pretty much illustrating the human plight through song. He's just one of the best at doing this. some of the best songs on Illinois were Chicago. Chicago is, probably one of his most acclaimed and known songs throughout his entire discography. Decatur was another one of the really good songs from this album. Jacksonville is another one, as is Come On, Feel the Illinois. And, these titles on this album are super long. So as I'm going through some of these titles, this is just a piece of the actual song title, which some of the titles are like long enough to be a short paragraph. But Illinois, to this day, is probably my second favorite album by Sufjan Stevens, and that's only because the album 2 albums later from him, Carrie and Lowell. Lowell, as I mentioned, is his stepdad's name and also collaborator stepdad's name, and Carrie is the name of his late mother. So Carrie and Lowell is probably one of the biggest tear-jerking albums I've ever heard, any genre. I mean, just the sounds. It's not only the concepts and existential concepts of this album, but it's the emotion and the dreariness, the melancholy, the nostalgia in the instrumentation itself. It's hard to really describe how he does it with some of these muffled acoustic folk sounds and just the muted effect that he has on his vocals, where it sounds like it's buried, through 2 or 3 filters or layers, almost suffocated in a way. But he's got a very quiet tone, a quiet quality to his vocals. He's not blaring out when he's singing. It's kind of a hushed tone, but it somehow is able to still harness all kinds of emotion. And there's a beautiful simplicity in some of it, especially in Carrie and Lowell. But all it takes is one listen to the song, for instance, 4th of July from Carrie and Lowell, and you'll get exactly the type of just anguished but accepting sadness in some of Sufjan Stevens' music. 4th of July, just an unbearably sad song, as are a few from Carrie and Lowell. And again, he's not just hitting you with like just devastating facts that on its surface are just gonna make tears come out. But again, it's a combination of his vocal delivery, the lyrics, and the musical accompaniment. And again, he is a very well-trained multi-instrumentalist. Even though he was a late starter, his musical conceptualization and understanding is what makes his music so bright. And, even trying to tie him down to a indie-like subgenre, you would have to look at maybe, again, indie folk, folktronica, where you have just enough electronic devices working with folk music to kind of create its own thing. But there are also, dream pop qualities to his music, where there are some kind of pillowy instrumentals, especially on Carrie and Lowell and some on Illinois. But again, if you look at certain projects of his, like Age of Odds or Age of Ads, ADZ, which was the 2010 album between Illinois and Carrie and Lowell, a little bit more electronica going on, but there are also some experimental moments. There's still a little bit of folk in there. It wasn't my favorite Sufjan Stevens album, nor was his latest actual album release. And again, by actual album release, I mean like a collection of songs, not an ambient album where you can listen to the whole thing and you could barely tell that the music's there because it's one of those wallpaper-ish type of projects. But his latest album, Ascension, wasn't one of my favorite, but it did have some outstanding moments within it. So again, just based on these 2 songs that I've heard from the upcoming project, from the one he's about to release now, the collab album with Angelo de Augustine, A Beginner's Mind, I'm just thrilled. Listen to those 2 teasers from the album. Again, one of them's called Reach Out and the other one is Olympus, and you'll get the kind of pillowy, this is a little bit more dream pop-ish Sufjan Stevens, not the straight up, folky style that you were getting from Decatur from Illinois. So yeah, look, listen to either Michigan or Seven Swans. Definitely listen to Illinois. Listen to Age of Ads as well, but definitely listen to Carrie and Lowell. That's my favorite Sufjan Stevens album. That, like Illinois, was up there for album of the year, if not actual #1 album of the year, according to multiple publications. Illinois and Carrie and Lowell are easily his two most critically acclaimed albums. But again, his track record is very interesting, just high quality, but it's also kind of head scratching when you look at some of the projects that he's taken up. But again, I wasn't mad at that ambient music. I have grown to love ambient music. Anybody from Tim Hecker to M. Geddes Gangras to old Aphex Twin and The Orb and Gas, you name it. I love it. But this is an actual Sufjan Stevens album we're getting here. I expect it to be colorful. I expect it to be very pretty instrumentally. Sometimes he does a little much with the horns. Like listen to the one of the opening songs on Illinois, where he just has like a whole orchestral thing with all kinds of busy horns, and it's more anthemic. Some of his stuff is a little bit like that, but again, I like kind of his, his hushed, somber style of music a little bit more. But again, I think he's going even more into the dream pop-ish areas just based on hearing Reach Out and Olympus from this Beginner's Mind album. So yeah, give this all a listen. Let me know what you think about Sufjan Stevens. Again, I think he's one of the best indie artists of the past 20 years. And he's just super respected in the game. Again, he's not one of these blockbuster names that is ubiquitous and just known amongst the masses. He's not that. But in terms of just track record, reputation, he's nearly as good as it gets. Like, I put it like this. Annie Clark, also known as St. Vincent, was in his touring band back in like 2006, 2007. This would be just after Sufjan Stevens released Illinois. St. Vincent was in his touring band. And he's played on at least a couple of the Nationals albums. He played on, I believe, Boxer and not Alligator, but High Violet. I believe he played on Boxer and High Violet, and they played, I believe, on Age of Adds or Age of Odds. Please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.